In America today, dogs and cats are more than just our best friends, they are family. Yet the agencies we fund to care for the neediest of these animals are instead killing 2 million of them every year. Coming up in this episode of No Kill Know-How, why the reason historically given to explain this killing is the very thing that allows it to continue. Hi, I'm Nathan Winograd of the No Kill Advocacy Center. Today I'm going to answer the question, why do animal shelters kill animals? For many people, the answer to that question is because there are too many animals and not enough homes, or pet overpopulation. If only everyone would spay and neuter their animals, goes this argument, then there wouldn't be so many animals and shelters wouldn't have to kill. In other words, it's not the fault of animal shelters when they kill animals. It's the fault of irresponsible people. Over 25 years ago, as a law student, a rescuer, a community cat caregiver, and a Humane Society board member, I believed in pet overpopulation too. And why wouldn't I? Not only was the idea of pet overpopulation the one and only narrative given to explain shelter killing when I entered the movement in my early 20s, but every animal protection group from the very small to the very large and every size in between repeated it again and again and again. So woven into the cause of companion animal protection was the notion of pet overpopulation that to even conceive of challenging its existence, to claim it is in fact a myth, as I later did and still do, came to be viewed not only as heretical but absurd. What made me question the very foundation upon which virtually all shelter animal advocacy and killing had rested for better than half a century? Why do I now view a belief in pet overpopulation not as the key to understanding and solving our nation's crisis of shelter killing, but the very thing that has enabled it and in many communities allows it to continue? 4 things. Number 1, my experiences as a shelter director who ended the killing in my community. Number 2, the experience of other shelter directors who have subsequently done the same. Number 3, doing top-down assessments for shelters all over the country, indeed all over the world, and seeing how poorly they were run and all the alternatives to killing they failed to implement. And number 4, the numbers, specifically supply and demand. Let me explain. In the 1990s, I took a job working at what was at the time the most successful shelter in the nation. The local SPCA in San Francisco had been experimenting with a series of unprecedented alternatives to replace shelter killing. Programs such as foster care, off-site adoptions, community cat sterilization, pet retention, and behavior rehabilitation. Those programs might not seem so radical now, although I would argue that they are still in short supply, but they were revolutionary back then, as I explain in Redemption, my book about the no-kill revolution in America and the documentary of the same name. A few short years later, when I left the SPCA to take over as the director of an animal control shelter in central New York, I not only took these alternatives with me, I expanded upon them and used them to replace killing from day one. It didn't take us 5 years or even 1 year. It didn't take us months or even weeks. We stopped the killing overnight, earning our county the distinction of being the safest community for homeless animals in the nation. Despite a very high per capita intake rate, roughly double the national average, we were able to achieve this important milestone not by changing the public's behavior, but by changing ours. We took killing off the table, implemented alternatives to that killing, and in the process created the first full-service, open-admission, no-kill animal control facility in the country. It didn't matter if they were young or old, blind or deaf, healthy, sick, injured, or traumatized. It didn't matter if they were dogs or cats, bunnies or guinea pigs, hamsters, rats, or mice, or any other animal who came to us, including the occasional horse, chicken, pig, and cow. They were all guaranteed a home, and they all found one. We did it immediately, before a high-volume sterilization program was in place, and we did not compromise the quality of the homes we were looking for. That would not have been possible if there was pet overpopulation. Inspired by that success and determined to ensure that every animal entering every shelter in America was likewise guaranteed a helping hand and a new beginning, rather than the end of the line, I founded the No Kill Advocacy Center, an organization dedicated to spreading this new model of animal sheltering, what I came to call the NoKill Equation, across the country. Through books, national conferences, a documentary, step-by-step guides, model policies and procedures, shelter reform legislation, assistance to shelter directors and shelter reformers nationwide, and finally, where necessary, filing lawsuits, the No Kill Advocacy Center has inspired or forced shelters in towns and cities nationwide to likewise adopt the No Kill Equation and similarly achieve immediate life-saving results. Included in those communities are those with per capita intake rates over 10 times that of New York City, the most congested urban area in the United States, while nonetheless still placing over 95% and as high as 99% of the animals, returning the term euthanasia to its dictionary definition as an act of mercy. Collectively, these shelters are now saving millions of lives who would have otherwise been killed under the false guise of pet overpopulation. In fact, the rapidly decreasing national death rate in shelters that has accompanied the embrace of the No-Kill Equation was hailed by one commentator, unaware of the root cause of this decline, as both the single biggest success of the modern animal protection movement and puzzling at the same time. That such success is possible should not be puzzling. In fact, it should surprise no one because the statistics have long proven that it is possible. Unfortunately, because the existence of pet overpopulation was considered a foregone conclusion, no one was actually considering the numbers, not even those groups which for decades claimed to be the foremost animal sheltering experts, and not even when it came to something as fundamental to proving pet overpopulation as comparing supply with actual demand. Consider this. We know the supply of animals. Roughly 6 million animals enter shelters every year, of which about 2 million are killed. By some estimates, the killing is as low as 1.5 million. If there really is pet overpopulation, demand has to be less than supply. Put another way, the numbers of animals needing homes and shelters has to be more than the number of homes that are available. What is the demand? Let's listen to the top expert at the oldest national companion animal organization in the U.S. During a radio interview in which she explained that killing in shelters is necessary because of pet overpopulation, the Vice President of Animal Protection for the American Humane Association was asked how many homes become available for companion animals every year in the United States. Here's what she had to say.
Between 6 and 8 million dogs and cats enter shelters every year. Is that to you proof, absolute proof, that that pet overpopulation is true here and it's not a myth?
I'm sorry. Is that true? State that again.
Your website shows that 6 to 8 million dogs and cats enter shelters every year. Is that the absolute proof, in your opinion, that pet overpopulation is real?
Surplus.
Oh, absolutely. Yes, absolutely.
Do you have any idea how many people will be looking for new pets this year?
Gosh, I don't know that number.
But that's not all she said. Listen.
Someone told me recently that if every person in America right now adopted 8 animals, we would pick up the surplus of friendly, healthy animals that need to be adopted. But that means we'd have to do that every year. So, if we all did that this year, we'd all like, hey, we can do that. But unfortunately, next year there'll be that many more animals still to adopt.
Wow.
If every person in America adopted 8 animals, that number would equal about 2.4 billion dogs and cats, 1,200 times the number actually being killed in shelters. If we can adopt out 2.4 billion, as she claimed, we can adopt out the true number. Of course, the notion that 2.4 billion shelter animals need homes is ludicrous, but 1.5 to 2 million do. Can we adopt out 2 million more? We can. Using the most successful shelters as a benchmark and adjusting for population, U.S. shelters combined have the potential to adopt out almost 9 million animals a year. That is over 4 times the number being killed. In fact, it is more than total impounds. But the news gets even better. Every year, as many as 30 million people will add a new animal to their home. The problem isn't that there are not enough homes. It's where those homes are getting their animals. It's a market share challenge. And to overcome that challenge, shelters need to keep animals alive long enough to find homes, better market the animals, and compete with pet stores and breeders. Can shelters do that? Many already have. There are communities across the country taking in tens of thousands of animals every year, over 50 per day, sometimes 100 per day, finding homes for all the animals in their care through the No-Kill Equation model of sheltering. And other than their success, there is very little these communities have in common, covering as they do every conceivable demographic: urban and rural, rich and poor, northern and southern, large and small, politically progressive, and those that are very conservative. In fact, there are now over 500 cities and towns across the U.S. with placement rates above 90% and as high as 99%. And the majority of them achieve this success in 6 months or less, and often before a low-cost sterilization program was put into place. Indeed, many of them ended the killing overnight. One day these shelters were killing, and the next day they weren't. They took killing off the table and adopted their way to no-kill. Now, some people have responded to this information by claiming that even if there are enough homes, even if shelters can adopt their way out of killing, the problem is that people only want certain kinds of dogs, not pit bulls, which they argue are in shelters in high numbers. I'm going to put aside the documented problems associated with visual identification of breeds and all the studies out there that prove that dogs we label pit bulls often don't have any American Pit Bull Terrier, American Staffordshire Terrier, or Staffordshire Bull Terrier in them. I'm also going to put aside the fact that virtually every study that has looked at the issue has found that these dogs are not more likely to bite and do not bite harder, because how a dog looks says nothing about his or her behavior. We'll tackle those topics in another video. The main problem with this thinking is that it is contradicted by the facts. Take Muncie, Indiana, for example, where 80 to 90% of the dogs received are described as pit or pit mixes. Now that's an extreme example, as the general consensus is that even if we could define pit bull with any degree of accuracy, these dogs make up roughly 40% of overall shelter intake. But instead of making excuses like no one will adopt them, Muncie Animal Care and Services holds a month-long celebration they call a pity party to showcase them for adoption and to end discrimination.
Pit bulls. There you see those cute little faces. Pity Party is what it's called. It's taking place over the course of July. Muncie Animal Care and Services has a goal of reducing the negative stigma of pit bulls and educating people about the caring breed.
How did they do? Muncie has a 99% placement rate for dogs. And that's not just for 1 month. That's all year long. Muncie also has a local law that not only makes it illegal to discriminate on the basis of breed, but makes it illegal to kill healthy and treatable pitties and other dogs in the shelter. In other words, the pity party never ends. And they are not the only one. I did it in New York almost 2 decades ago, and hundreds of others have done it since. Again, none of this would have been possible if pet overpopulation existed. So where did this notion that it does come from? It came from a logical fallacy known as backward or circular reasoning. Shelter directors whose agencies were killing animals and their enablers at the large national organizations like the American Humane Association, the Humane Society of the United States, and the ASPCA took the fact that these pounds were killing animals and claimed that they would not be killing if homes were available, arguing that no one working in shelters wants to kill.
The fact that we still have friendly, healthy animals and rehabilitatable animals being euthanized in shelters in the United States is proof that there is pet overpopulation. Absolutely.
As much as we want to believe that everyone who works at an animal shelter is an animal lover who is passionate about protecting animals, and as much as that is what those places can and should be, the ideal and the reality are worlds apart. As animal lovers who do not want to kill animals refuse to work at agencies that do kill, or if they do not last, working at your typical American pound is a job, not a mission. And that means animals are left at the mercy of those who were hired specifically to kill them and who are reconciled to doing so. Moreover, for pet overpopulation to be true, all other possible causes of killing would have to be eliminated. That is, in order for pet overpopulation to be responsible for killing, we'd have to make sure that shelters that kill are doing all they can to implement alternatives before they reach for the needles, that they have maxed out their adoption potential, and whenever an alternative to killing is possible, that alternative is chosen instead of killing. Sadly, at far too many American animal shelters, we know this is not happening. Some shelters don't foster animals, choosing to kill them instead. Some shelters won't allow volunteers, don't provide medical care, round up to kill rather than sterilize community cats, or refuse to do off-site adoptions. Some shelters don't effectively market their animals to the public, or are only open during weekday business hours when people are at work or have children in school, making it difficult, if not impossible, to make adoption from a shelter their first choice. Indeed, some municipal shelters don't adopt out animals at all. Ultimately, we can debate whether people working in shelters want to kill, but when cost-effective alternatives to killing exist and have already been implemented by progressive shelters throughout the nation, this much is beyond dispute. Those working at kill shelters today certainly find killing easier than doing what is necessary and proven to stop it. Over a decade ago, when I first suggested that pet overpopulation was a myth, I was accused of some nefarious intent. I was accused of being anti-spay-neuter or pro-breeding, both of which are wrong. I am not against sterilization or for breeding. I went into animal sheltering because I love animals and wanted to reform our dysfunctional sheltering system. And when it became clear that the main reason historically given for why animals were being killed did not in fact exist, I did what anyone who truly loves animals would do. I celebrated and worked to share the good news far and wide in order to protect animals. Does the fact that pet overpopulation doesn't exist mean we shouldn't advocate for sterilization? It does not. When I ran animal shelters, we did a lot of sterilization. In one shelter I oversaw, we did over 10,000 surgeries a year, over 80% of which were free. In fact, we paid people up to $10 if they let us sterilize their animal for free. High-volume sterilization is a core program of the No-Kill Equation model of sheltering I champion. Moreover, for community dogs and cats who are not social with people, sterilization programs ensure that when these dogs and cats end up in shelters, they face a fate other than death. And continued promotion and availability of high-volume, low-cost sterilization is also a means to help a community reduce intakes, making the achievement of no-kill even easier. This is important because the lower the intake, the easier it is for even unmotivated, ineffective, and uncaring shelter directors to replace killing. And if sterilization allows a community to drop intake significantly enough that local demand for animals can no longer be met, the community can begin importing animals from high kill rate jurisdictions, saving those lives too. Finally, I have long argued that regardless of why animals are dying, they are dying, and as long as they are, rescue and adoption are ethical imperatives. That is why I support laws to ban the retail sale of commercially bred animals in pet stores and other legislative efforts to curtail and even eliminate commercial breeding. But more to the point, if pet overpopulation doesn't exist, it begs the question, why are animals dying in shelters? In traditional American shelters, animals are killed primarily out of habit and convenience, because it is easier to kill animals than do the work necessary to place them, and because elected officials and bureaucrats that oversee those shelters do not hold shelter managers accountable to results. In short, animals are dying in shelters not because there are too many or because there are too few homes or because people don't want the kinds of animals in those shelters. They are dying primarily for one reason, because people in shelters are killing them. Replace those people, implement the proven programs of the No-Kill Equation, and we could be a no-kill nation today. In an upcoming video, I'll show you how. You can subscribe on the No-Kill Advocacy Center's YouTube page. You can also learn more by downloading our guide on the Myth of Pet Overpopulation at NoKillAdvocacyCenter.org. And while you're there, you can not only donate to our efforts to ensure the implementation of the No-Kill Equation nationwide, but check out the rest of our No-Kill Advocates Toolkit, a collection of free, helpful guides designed to empower both shelter directors and shelter reformers with the knowledge they need to build no-kill communities.